Hi, everybody. Welcome to Global Tech Tales, What Buyers Want. I'm Keith Shaw, here to moderate a discussion with other editors from around the world about the hottest technology topics. Joining me for today's show, Matt Egan. He is the Global Content and Editorial Director at Foundry, representing the UK, and he's also my co-host on this show. Lee Rennick, she is the Executive Director of CIO Communities, who interviews CIOs in the US, Canada, and the UK through our CIO Leadership Live podcasts. And Martin Beyer, he is the Editor-in-Chief for B2B for Computervoc in Germany. Welcome all. So the topic for today is artificial intelligence. We're going to talk about what's going on, what we've seen over the past year. Before we start, I want Matt to explain why we're doing this show versus some of the other shows that we do within Foundry. Go ahead, Matt.
Sure. Thank you, Keith. Really appreciate that opportunity. So look, I'm really fortunate because I get to work with fine people like Lee and Martin and the other 160 or so editors that we have all around the world in the biggest markets for IT. And the reason that I'm fortunate is because these guys, they just speak to IT leaders the whole time, right? Every day we're speaking to literally hundreds of people who are leaders of organizations, leaders in the IT departments of organizations, strategic leaders, business leaders. And what they're doing the whole time is helping their organizations succeed through IT. And so what that gives us is this unique insight into what really matters, right? Forget the marketing hype, forget even sometimes what you hear from the analyst side, right? This is the real world lived experience of what it means to be working in IT today in any of the major markets in the world. And that's what we want to bring together and chat and share today.
All right, and I like the global perspective part of it as well, because sometimes we get bogged down here in the U.S. on just focusing on U.S. stuff. So it's really cool that we're going to have a lot of different voices for this show, plus future episodes where we're going to tackle some other topics and bring in other people. So it won't just be these four faces that you'll see on the show. It'll be me and Matt and probably a few other people as we go through these episodes. So we also wanted to start the episode with a couple of statistics to kind of frame the discussion around this. And so for the first stat for artificial intelligence, worldwide spending on AI is forecast to reach $632 billion in 2028. This is according to IDC, our sister company that we work with here. This includes AI-enabled applications, infrastructure, and related IT and business services. Again, this is going to be a compound annual growth rate of 29% from 2024 through 2028. Gen AI is going to outpace the overall AI market with a 5-year CAGR of 59.2%. Yet with all of this enthusiasm, we're also seeing a lot of surveys that are indicating that companies are not succeeding initially with the technology, and we're also seeing some surveys that say employees are not adopting this. So there seems to be a little bit of a balance. I want to just show you, there was at the 2024 CIO 100 and Symposium, Meredith Wayland, who is the Chief Research Officer of IDC, opened her keynote on Gen AI. Lee, you were actually at this conference.
Yep.
And basically she said that 1 year later, companies are reporting 37 POCs, 5 production launches, and a 68% success rate of Gen AI, predicting that in 2025 and 2026, companies were going to be in that AI pivot adoption phase. So it feels like we do have two sides of the same coin. So let's start the discussion there. What are you seeing around the world of AI? Is this the best thing since sliced bread, or are we taking a more of a cautious approach? What are the IT leaders that you speak with saying? Lee, I'll start with you since you were at this conference.
Yeah, great. So I was at the conference. It was amazing this year. A 3-day conference. We had sessions on AI, building teams, DE&I, lots of great topics that we were covering off, data and cloud, which is huge, right? So yeah, what we're hearing from organizations and what I've been hearing from a lot of CIOs is this year was a year where, what IDC said was last year was kind of the scramble stage, right? We were scrambling. Now we're pivoting. And what you're hearing from CIOs is they really looked at utilizing Gen AI, for building internal productivity, right? So really ensuring that their internal processes were increased, or they were better. They could do work better, which meant the bottom line of their businesses were in better shape because they were just enhancing this productivity. Now, I pulled some stats here, or a few little discussions I had with some CIOs at the conference. So Kader Sakaria for Gallagher said, they were doing a cloud migration program. They had a code base of 220,000 lines of code. He said it would have taken months to do the work for that migration. They did it in days. days. Okay. So
Wow.
huge transformation for them there. Mike Aiello of SecureWorks, he's the CTO there. They're a company that works in cyber events. They have 4 trillion events a week. That was filtered down and manually processed in the past. Now, 60% of those investigations because of Gen AI are fully automated. So there's a huge transformation in how businesses are looking at building internal productivity. What I'm hearing and sort of seeing is there's a couple of factors here with that. Data, right? If you don't have your data in a good shape, forget it. Gen AI is just not going to do what it needs to do for you. So we still have some companies going through that data transformation. A lot of companies during COVID put their data in the cloud. Now they're looking at the word repatriation back to servers, right? So they're kind of, I think, figuring that out. And now they're looking at ways of, okay, we've done this internal productivity. What does that mean for our external clients? Those customers, those end users outside of our business. And I think that's where we are right now. And that's what I'm hearing from many leaders and many CIOs.
Martin, you got some stuff to add. Are you hearing the same kind of thing? Are they still in that spending money phase?
Yeah, that's right, Lee. But from my point of view, the time for experimentation is over. AI projects are complex and expensive, and it's not just about asking a chatbot a question on the internet. Data must be prepared for use in the company. IT architectures and infrastructures must be redesigned. Security concepts must be developed, and above all, employees must be trained. All of this costs money in view of the difficult economic situation here in Europe and especially in Germany. CFOs are asking very carefully what the return on investment in AI is. IT budgets are also generally under pressure, and the challenge for CIOs is therefore to find the right KPIs to prove the added business value and benefits of AI. That's the critical point at the moment.
Yeah, I agree. And those 2 gentlemen I spoke to at the event, the CIOs, that's exactly what they were saying. We were able to prove to our C-suite and show that we have this internal productivity within our organization that's saving a lot of money, a lot of time. So therefore, it's been hugely successful for us. And we're tracking those use cases to then show the benefits to the business, right? And help the business grow. So I agree totally. Yeah.
Everyone says how important AI is, but after all the hype over artificial intelligence, the value is still hard to find.
Do you feel like that a lot of the IT leaders and the buyers are being pressured from the business side to adopt this? And maybe some of them are saying, well, wait a second, we're still in the middle of our transformation projects here. And now you're throwing, Gen AI at us or all of this other AI stuff. Do they feel that pressure, or do you feel like that they can get on top of it and be the spokesperson for the AI movement within companies?
Well, the State of the CIO report, we researched 1,100 leaders from around the world about, technology. And this was earlier in the year, right? This was in early 2024. And what they said was 79% of those surveyed said that they felt the CIO had an educational partnership with the CEO and the C-suite. And I asked that question to every CIO I interview, and they absolutely shake their head and say, yes, that's exactly what it is. We have an educational partnership whereby, the C-suite has to understand what we're working on, how we're implementing this. It's not a matter anymore, I think, of that pressure many told me about, of we need to do this because obviously generative AI was democratized, right? It's a very different thing now. Those CIOs are really researching, getting those people on the board. One CIO told me at the CIO 100, she has a board appointee that just deals with the technology first, right? And they meet on a weekly basis to talk about what she's working on. So I think you have to look at that aspect of it. These individuals are so instrumental to running business now. Their roles have completely changed. They are at the C-suite level, and they're educating and partnering in that respect. But I just interviewed Tony Olvet, who's the Group Vice President of Worldwide C-Suite and Digital Business Research at IDC yesterday, which was really cool. And IDC just released a Gen AI use case, a really special survey. They researched over 3,000 people around the world. And The question of who decides around the investment, it was pretty much an equal investment decision between business leaders and IT leaders. So that's just based on some of our really amazing research we put out. So, I think that's what I'm hearing as well, too. That educational partnership has been there now this year. And then, of course, that decision buying becomes sort of 50-50.
All right. I wanted to ask Matt this question as well as Martin, because they are over in Europe. So I've got a couple of European questions. But first, do IT leaders and buyers feel like that they're properly training employees on the use of generative AI tools? I know that training is one of the issues or training and slash the skills gap is one thing. And then we're also hearing concerns around accuracy of these tools, especially with the idea of hallucinations. So, obviously the three big concerns too are basically training, skills gap, accuracy, and then also security. They want to make sure that their data isn't going to be leaked out by these tools. Especially in Europe, I think with all of the regulations that they're moving versus the US, what are some of those concerns?
One of the things that's really interesting from my purview, I have the privilege I'm based in Europe, but I get to travel around the world. And actually, these are pretty consistent concerns. And it's borne out in the AI priorities study we did early last year, where I think, I'm going to quote this accurately, like skills was one of the biggest barriers. And it was like 50% of respondents says that was an issue. And security was the biggest concern. I think that was 51% of respondents. And that's across the world, right? That's in all the various different markets. The skills thing I think is really interesting. And it kind of relates back to one of the questions you asked before, Keith, which is, this is one of those rare occasions where a technology has passed over into the mainstream, and therefore business leaders who aren't technically minded are asking their IT leaders, what are we doing with AI, right? You don't often get business leaders asking, what are we doing with edge computing, or what are we doing with, 5G, right? But AI is that thing that's kind of crossed over, because ChatGPT, right? No, because it can do this cool, crazy stuff. Right. And so there's an element of pressure there. And exactly as Lee said, like a lot of people have focused very early on return on investment. So can we just do what we're doing now more efficiently? And to the point that Lee made, if your data and your infrastructure is in a sufficiently clean state, you can. That is totally achievable. But I think the more interesting kind of challenge now is to move on to those projects where it's built with AI ingrained from the ground up to solve a problem. But there is no doubt that skills is a big challenge. I was speaking to some IT leaders when I was in Singapore, admittedly, a few months ago, and they were talking about the fact that how do you hire for something when you don't know what the it is going to be, right? Like what you need is people who've got really good core skills, and they're curious, and they've got the right values, and they're comfortable solving problems. That is a challenge. And you're starting to see, we see this in our kind of online engagement, how IT certifications are becoming valued in some ways more than college degrees. Because how can you teach someone in a 3-year course something that 3 years ago wasn't like a key thing to worry about, kind of thing. So the skills gap is definitely there. And it's also compounded by the fact that a lot of these kind of operational efficiencies that are being driven by AI through IT implementations reduce the need to have junior people. So in a way, you're kind of reducing the pool of people who might become your skills leaders. And then on the security side of things, I mean, Martin should definitely speak to this because, living in mainland Europe, there's a whole other set of compliance issues there. But the reality is, AI can let you do anything at scale, right? And if the thing you're doing isn't correctly set up and ethically set up and doesn't have the right amount of human oversight, the risks are exponential, just as a potential for success is exponential. But I'd really like to hear from you on that, Martin, because working in Germany, you have a different and maybe more acute perspective on that, I guess.
Yeah, the regulation here in Germany is very, very hard sometimes, and and it's an important aspect at this point to give employees a framework for how they should use AI. This framework must leave room for experimentation and not prohibit too many things, but at the same time must ensure that no rules, for example, regarding data protection, are violated. And this framework is very important because otherwise a kind of shadow AI can emerge very quickly in the company, and cleaning this up can be very tedious, and we saw this in the early years of the cloud.
Yeah, we hear the same thing here when I talk to a lot of companies in the U.S. A lot of them want a framework or want some regulation, so they look at like, all right, we're going to see what Europe is going to do, because I think that there's a realization too that waiting for our government here in the U.S. to do something, it's probably not going to happen given not only the political side of things but also a general attitude around regulations and capitalism and free spirit and innovation and all that other stuff that I think we have sometimes gets in the way of that.
I think a lot of companies in the U.S. and around the world have had to, go have strict regulations around where they store their data in the cloud, right? So I would disagree a little bit. I don't think it's entrepreneurship and all of that is great, but the reality is that many companies right now have to have very strict regulations around their data around the world and where they store it, right? So I think that's one thing. And maybe that will help inform the security side of it a little bit more. It will have to anyway, because they'll have to have security overlay of that. Look, I mean, just on the Europe side of things, I just thought maybe I'd share a conversation I had with Elizabeth Akarita, who's she's a group deputy director of digital for Department of Science and Innovation and a few departments in the UK. So she works with 13 organizations and 17,000 employees, and they've developed this shared services model, right? So they're sharing out across these organizations within the UK. They did do a whole comprehensive change management plan. People were at the center of it. So what she said was, the team skills and the expertise were paramount to the success of the project, and they invested in training and development programs to ensure that the teams had the knowledge, the capacities to support the new platform, and also assist users, right, from all bits of the government. Because remember, when you're doing some sort of, you're trying out a new type of technology, you're also, prompt engineering comes into this, right? Because, this has been a problem with many companies, right? They let people use ChatGPT, maybe lawyers are using it, but they don't know how to prompt it to do what they need. So, she really drilled down on the fact that, under this model that they had training, development programs, all of that were so key to the success of the platform and sharing.
The other reason, and this is very related to entrepreneurialism, and certainly we all work for a company that's headquartered in the US. The other thing you've got to think about is intellectual property. And it's related to security because, it's how you handle your data when using an AI tool and thinking 3 steps ahead in terms of what can happen to your intellectual property using tools like ChatGPT or any of the other models that rely on large language models. So it brings us back to where Lee was there, which is what sounds like a very well executed plan, which is surprising to me as a UK citizen from the UK government, but excellent. Glad to hear that some of our tax dollars are being spent well. But a well executed plan requires a level of education of everybody, right, technical or otherwise, as to what you're trying to achieve, but also what are the guardrails within which you're trying to achieve it. And with that, Keith, I'm going to let you speak now because we both spoke over you.
So because the show is called What Buyers Want, or Global Tech Tales and then What Buyers Want, I want to ask if the IT leaders that you're speaking with, when they're developing their AI projects, do they want vendors to add Gen AI to their existing tools and software that they're using? Do they want to build it themselves? Are they in that build or buy mode, and they say, no, we can do this better if we build it with our own people? Or are they looking kind of in between there, and they're looking for consultancies, it's the big 3 or the big 4 of those to then guide them through the process? Because each of the vendors that we talk to, they would raise their hand and go, of course they want vendors. The vendor would say that. I'm just wondering if this is a decision that's even being made at this point.
I think it's all of the above, Keith, and it depends on...
I don't like all of the above answers, but that's okay.
Let me unpick it a bit. Let me unpick it a bit, right?
I'll bring in some research afterwards, but go for it, Matt.
Okay.
I think it is all of the above, but it's all of the above on a horses for courses basis. And if you flip it around and you think about it from the vendor perspective, right, what I'm seeing where some of the most successful vendor relationships with IT leaders, and that includes vendor CTOs working really closely with IT departments and IT leaders, is where you get organizations who be really smart about building ecosystem products. So it definitely is all of the above, because at one level it's like AI PCs, right? Great. Or adding AI capabilities to existing software platforms. These are great for what we were talking about before, which is the kind of almost at the edge building increased efficiencies into output and to workflow. But like what IT leaders are wanting for the next stage is the environment and the platform and the infrastructure from which they can innovate. And so I'm going to name loads of vendors now because I'm being vendor agnostic here, but I look at some of the work that, for instance, Dell, Microsoft, NVIDIA are doing together to create like combinations of hardware, software, and cloud and on-prem, which in principle, at least, out of the box, and Amazon and Google, they're doing similar things with their hardware partners, often the same hardware partners. But in principle, allow IT leaders to have all of the above, right? They're creating platforms for where, yes, there is efficiency in the way that things are processed. The infrastructure is working in a way that supports the use of AI in all of the kind of process-driven approaches. But also, if you're trying to innovate on top of that to build your own products and solutions, in principle, at least, you've always got best-in-class technology. You've always got the compute that supports the AI. So that's from the vendor side. But Lee, I really do want to hear your actual facts.
Like I said, I just interviewed Tony Olvet, who's one of our top researchers within our organization. So look, this report they just put out, 47% of those surveyed said they would compose the solution, either buy, leverage, and tweak. So when I looked into that stat, what they were saying was that they would definitely partner with a vendor. They would leverage that, and then they would tweak it to their own internal needs, which is kind of what you're saying, Matt. It's like they're going to look at it and say, how do we increase productivity for our sales teams, for our finance team, for our legal teams, for our end user customer, whoever that is, because the end user customer is everything. So I think that's really interesting. And what I've heard from CIOs is, we're working with the vendors and the partners. I interviewed a CIO here in Canada, Parm, who said, I actually meet with all the vendors I want to work with. We have a good working relationship. We look at how we can leverage what they have to offer. And then, we look at tweaking it for our various use cases we need internally for our organization. So,
It depends on the kind of solution as well, right? Because I think there are maybe three different levels to this, right? There is and we talked about this a lot, there is we have an existing process, a thing we do. Can we do it quicker with AI, right? And then that is definitely where you're either looking for tweaks to existing hardware and software products, Copilot in Microsoft's products. It is the AI PCs that are coming out that just then you can start to spin the wheels quicker, right? Then there's creating a new process that is somewhat enhanced by AI, right? And that's similar, right? But you kind of get moving more towards where you might need all of your infrastructure and platforms to be AI enabled. And then there is the showstopper, which is I think where we're moving to now, which is we're rethinking the customer journey. We're thinking of a new product, service, or solution within our organization. And for that, from the ground up, we need like vendor support to give us like AI capabilities that can allow us to really fundamentally change the way our business is operating. And that's where, this is a massive land grab, right? From the vendor perspective, it's both exciting and terrifying because there's going to be big shifts in terms of who provides services to all these customers. But it's a huge opportunity, right? Because that is what IT leaders are looking for, that level of support.
I wanted to bring up another question. And, obviously we don't live in a bubble here with a lot of these technologies. So while all of these companies are making decisions around, what vendor to use for generative AI, what projects to do, whether someone is using an existing software package and waiting for Gen AI to be added to that. At the same time, all of these large-scale AI companies, OpenAI, Google, Anthropic, all of those companies continue to update their models. In fact, this week we just heard a story that OpenAI is going to be starting to add AI agents or agentic AI. And all of a sudden, all of the news comes out. We're like, oh, well, they're already at the next phase. So when you talk with IT leaders and buyers, do you hear that any of them on the fence about waiting for the technology to get better, or are they just basically saying, we'll take what we can get now and we know that in the future maybe it'll be better, or maybe they'll be moving on to other technologies within this space? Martin, I'm going to start with you.
Yeah, I've hardly seen any other technology in recent decades that has developed and spread as quickly as Gen AI. But this is also a problem for the user companies that want to utilize this technology. It's very difficult to keep track of the various developments and to evaluate and categorize them. Every month, new models come onto the market, or there are new versions of existing models. Last year, we talked a lot about chatbots and copilots. Today, it's all about agent systems. And when Mark Benioff tells us that millions of AI agents will soon be flying through the Salesforce universe, it confuses me at first. What do these agents do? Who controls them? Do the Salesforce agents get on with agents from other manufacturers like SAP or Microsoft? And with every news item, dozens of new questions arise that CIOs have to answer for the company. I think we must be very careful that AI does not become a nightmare.
Well, and also, yeah, I completely agree with that, Martin. And it's interesting. I was at a vendor event not so long ago, and there were lots of CIOs there. So they're kind of talking a slightly different way at a vendor event, right? But this one person said to me, like, it feels a lot like these are really impressive technologies looking for a killer app, right? And you know, like the best IT leaders, the best people in those roles, yes, they're ambitious and they're strategic, but they're also kind of pragmatic in the sense that, like, we're using technology and we're using an IT strategy to solve problems, to improve things, not just because they can do stuff, right? And I was thinking cloud is such a good analogy for this, because I know it was never nearly as big in the public imagination, but there was another period of time where everything was cloud for a bit, right? And that's all everybody said. And the whole idea was cloud is going to solve all your problems. Everything's going to be more efficient. Everything's going to be cheaper. And no, it's a whole other set of problems. But who would have thought that an online bookstore, would revolutionize enterprise cloud, right? But that's what Amazon did almost by accident. And so when I look at the continual technological updates that these AI specific vendors, and I include Google in that, and I include OpenAI, even despite their relationships. When I think about the more than iterative improvements that they're making the whole time, I still feel like, yes, there is a winning killer app solution out there, but this is so much kind of window dressing to show what we can do rather than actually solving a problem for a customer. And that's what, in my experience, IT leaders really care about.
I would say anybody that says this will solve all of your problems, basically just be skeptical and take a grain of salt, because anybody that's been in this industry for a number of years knows that that's never going to happen.
Yeah, right.
You're either going to create new problems or to solve some problems and then give you new ones too. Lee, anything to add on that? Go ahead.
I was just going to say, often the things that really cut through, and I talked about Amazon to AWS there, right, which was kind of an accidental thing. Like, think about something as fundamental as Google search, right? That was not like a well-structured business plan to do a thing with technology, right? It was a tool that solved a problem really well and then took over the world, and then as a consequence changed the entire way that the world works, right? You don't get many Googles, but I do think this time with AI, you're going to see some things emerge like that fundamentally change the way we do things. But we have to rethink how we're doing things. And if I'm an IT leader, and I hear this often enough from these people, right, like they're ambitious and excited, but also it has to solve a problem. Otherwise, we're just spending money to spin our wheels.
Yeah, and so Lee, I want to ask you, in terms of next year, do you start seeing? We talked about ROI in the beginning of the show. When does that 3-letter acronym start to rear its ugly head with a lot of these companies? Because you're seeing a lot of this money being spent. At some point, the CFOs are going to get involved, and they're going to be like, "Wait, where's this return that was being promised to us? Whether it was the vendor or whether it was the internal IT group. Like, do you see that happening next year, or is it still going to be a little bit of the Wild West in terms of what they can spend in the budgets and that kind of stuff?"
Well, look, what I'm hearing, what I'm seeing from CIOs is, look, if they have that educational partnership with the C-suite, right? That's the first winning objective here if you're a tech leader, right? How are you communicating to your C-suite? What are you telling them? How are you working with the CFO on this? The companies that are most of the companies I spoke to at the CIO 100 in the US were implementing Gen AI. They were seeing, as I mentioned at the top of the show, great work around increased productivity within their own internal teams, which in that respect has savings from a financial perspective, right? So I think many of these organizations have already got some internal productivity going. They're making game-changing, work with their internal teams, saving money there. The question is like, what, maybe to Matt's point, what's going to be added on to this, right? Is this, like, where is this on the technology S curve, right? Where is this right now? It's probably somewhere down here, right? And it's going to go up here. Is it going to fall off? Is quantum the next big thing, right?
Oh my
I've
God,
talked to a lot of
quantum,
people about that, and everyone laughs at me, but it's like quantum, the speed at which we process all this stuff, right?
Yeah,
very related. So, I guess what I would say is right now, I hear that many organizations have developed really great use cases. They've implemented them. They're seeing some savings. I don't think there's any person that have said to me, my board or my CEO doesn't want to continue to invest in this and look at ways we can increase productivity in our business. But the question is, to your point, Keith, with these vendors, where are they at? How are they going to improve this? And what's coming next, right? One CIO just said to me last week, it's fine, we're doing it, we're implementing it, we're going to keep using it, it's going to keep evolving, but what's coming behind it, right? And what's the next thing on the technology S-curve? And he said to me, maybe it is quantum, but so I think that's where I would sort of wrap it up for 2025. We're going to continue to see that increased productivity. We're going to see it being used. We're going to see benefits of it. The CIO will still be very connected, and the CTO to the C-suite. And they'll keep using it as the organizations and vendors keep developing it, increasing it, and making it a better product to use.
Yeah. Matt, anything else to add that you're hearing, or are you hearing that the CFOs are they keeping out of this for a while?
I think the CFOs are very deeply involved in this because they're looking at, again, it's crossed over to the mainstream and they're looking at AI, and I think now specifically agentic AI, I can never say that word, and thinking.
I know I'm not a big fan of that phrase.
Quite frankly, thinking about removing humans, right? I've said this before. As a senior executive, I've spent many years, answering questions from well-meaning board members about where our employees are based in the world, right? Can we move them to a cheaper market? And now it's about, can we replace them with AI? Not in our world, I should say, but I know that's the question.
And
I think
Matt, you don't know that you don't know yet if I'm in AI. I could be an AI, a really smart one.
Me too.
This is giving me some food for thought. But I think we did a pulse survey on CIO.com last month, and 74% of the CIO respondents said they're really bullish on the critical nature of AI for their business. That's the plus point. The negative point is ahead of that were things like security and skills and IT business alignment, which I think is a really critical point here. And what I think about when I think about 2025 is, and I'll butcher it, but there is a Bill Gates quote about people always overestimate the amount of change that's going to happen in a year and underestimate the amount of change that's going to happen in 5 years, which I always read as just look back 5 years, right? And I promise you 5 years ago, we were talking about GPT. We were talking about generative AI. But we, as enterprise technologists, were talking about it in a way that nobody was interested in, right? And we're not there now. So I think I couldn't tell you what it's going to look like, but I really expect acceleration in 2025, to be honest.
Yeah. Martin, any final thoughts on 2025, what to expect?
I'm a little bit skeptical, as I think companies will realize that Gen AI is not the holy grail that solves all business problems. And for many use cases, companies will realize that they don't need large, expensive AI models, but the lean search or automation tool is often completely sufficient. So I think the hype will calm down a little bit, and a much more realistic view of AI technology will prevail from my point of view.
We should put this date in the diary and come back in a year and re-record, and then let's see.
The last thing we want to do on the show is we want to have everybody vote. So this is just a simple yes or no question. It's unrelated to the buyer part of it, but I do want to think there's been a lot of stories about the disillusionment around AI, and have we reached that trough of disillusionment? The word bubble has been thrown out a lot. So my vote, my question for you: will the AI bubble burst in 2025? Mainly from the giant vendors that have been getting a lot of money to develop a lot of these models. I'm not saying that AI is going to burst within companies, but do you think that we might see a minor bubble burst where some of these big companies are in trouble, the investments are going down, or companies are going to be pulling back their spending? Any one of those could contribute to a AI bubble burst. So just give me a yes or no. I'm going to vote. I think at the moment, I think we will see one. We'll see maybe a pullback of some sort. So I vote yes. Martin, yes or no?
Yes. Yes.
Oh, yes. Okay. Martin's on my side. All right, Matt.
Bubble will burst when I see the market cap from Nvidia, $3 trillion. It's absolutely crazy from my point of view.
Well, yeah, I agree with that. So I would say yes, in the sense that I don't think the implementation of AI within the enterprise is going to slow down. I do think the level of investment in AI specific tech will, because I think, again, as always often happens, the big vendors are hoovering this stuff up, right? They're figuring it out, and they're going to provide solutions rather than exciting technologies.
Okay, and Lee?
No bubble burst.
All right.
By the way, I'm not like really good at these little phrases, so I just hope I'm voting the right way. But I don't think the bubble will burst. I think it'll continue. Big vendor companies will continue to innovate, try and partner with as many organizations as possible, build in new solutions, and we'll still have a pretty robust year with generative AI being part of the whole business platform.
All right, I want to modify my vote just a little bit, and I'm allowed to because I'm the moderator, the host of the show. I don't think it's going to be a burst in the same way that we saw a bubble burst in the early internet days. Remember, like in the 2000s. I think we are going to see some company pullback, or there's going to be an adjustment. Is that a good word? A readjustment of some of the money that's coming out, but it's not going to be we're not going to be launched into a recession in the AI world, and we're not going to get an AI winter like we used to, we did.
Yeah. Keith,
20, 30 years ago.
Are you telling me I should sell my shares in Netscape at this point? Is that?
Wow, there's a reference. All right, yeah. Listen, I want to thank everybody for participating in this. It's again very brave of you guys to do this. Thank you all for participating, and we're going to be back next month with some additional editors. So the faces you see here might not be the same faces, and we're going to talk about the world of cloud computing. So that was even brought up by Matt. So we're going to kind of jump off that, and so again, thank you all for participating.
Thank
Thanks
you
so much.
Thank you.
All right, that's all the time we have for the show today. Feel free to add any comments you have below. Check out our other Tech Talk shows, such as Today in Tech, CIO Leadership Live, and Demo if you are interested in seeing B2B product demonstrations. I'm Keith Shaw. Thanks for watching.